Hey everybody, welcome back to the Energy MD podcast, where we help you resolve your long COVID or chronic fatigue syndrome so that you can get back to living your best life. So I'm really excited today because we're going to be talking with Dr. Robin Rose all about Renology, how she resolved her own kidney disease, and how she's helping others now. So let's learn a little bit about her. So Robin Rose, MD, is a family medicine holistic functional physician with decades of practice experience, currently focused on primary care kidney medicine as a regenerative and preventive endeavor. Kidney distress is a pandemic, and we wait too long to step in. And so Dr. Rose created Renology, an approach that encourages early awareness and action to reverse kidney damage. The array of options is wide, and then Dr. Rose discovered and researched peptides for kidney, writing a definitive guide on using bioregulator peptides to reclaim health and offer freedom to those burdened with CKD or chronic kidney disease. Robin, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So I'm really excited about talking about kidney disease. It affects so many people. I wonder if we could start off by you sharing a little bit of your story and how you ended up focusing in this field.
Absolutely. So I kind of make this joke of health food Hannah doesn't get cancer. And that was me. I was kind of a health food nut since the 60s and taught a lot of people what to do. And one day I started having blood pressure spikes. This was following a gut virus. And basically, to make a long story short, I was diagnosed with a kidney tumor. It was very clear I want this out. And post nephrectomy, with the party line is no problem, you can live with one kidney. Basically, 3 months post-operatively, I found out that my function was basically 25%.
Whoa.
Not a very sustainable situation. And there was basically a lineup of willingness to install plumbing, basically to put in the tubing for dialysis. When will you be ready?
Mhm.
And to be honest, I wasn't ready. I wasn't interested. What do you have to offer me to improve? Oh, no, 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 no. Either I was told, don't worry, people live for a long time with this. Okay, I don't feel good, so what do we do? Or don't be surprised if you lose 5% a year. 25%, that didn't give me very long.
Mm.
So I decided to reclaim my life and found a wonderful naturopath who only worked with kidney, who really kind of pulled me along at a time when I really wasn't well enough to process intellectually. Kidney affects the whole body, all cells. My brain wasn't functioning, and I became aware of that in time. And found out, okay, my potassium was high, my phosphorus was high, my uric acid was high, my PTH was high. What do you do? So I sat here. I live in Hawaii on the beach, and fortunately I have internet, and I sat down and started with what do kidneys look like? I reviewed basic sciences, started reviewing, all right, what about potassium? What about phosphorus? And slowly, slowly over time, I finally got my GFR about to 51, which I felt dramatically better, but still issues. And then I discovered peptides. And for everybody who's listening, who may or may not know, proteins are these big folded up molecules. Peptides are a little piece of the protein. And then there's bioregulator peptides, which is even teenier piece of a protein. And they're very potent. Insulin is a peptide. So when you think about humanity needing assistance, insulin's an amazing gift. All of these peptides have quite impressive roles. And so basically, the last few times I've checked my GFR, which is glomerular filtration rate, that means how good of a filter is this organ being, has been 68 with one kidney. Pretty good. And I basically feel fine. I'm still aware of some things. And so, you look at how we categorize kidney disease, and we do it by stages. And so stage one is, essentially over GFR of 90, people are fine. I mean, there's probably some reason to be aware of it, but that's kind of like the pie in the sky, nice numbers to have. You get into stage two, which is from a GFR of 60 to 90, and sidebar, it's basically considered normal in the realm of kidney medicine. But in the work that I've been evolving, I don't agree, because we're already seeing dysbiosis. That means the gut flora is messed up and things are leaking through and damaging kidney. It may be under the radar, but there's certainly reason to be aware of it. The immune system starts declining, mitochondrial dysfunction happens, endothelial dysfunction happens, and autoimmune tendencies start becoming a little bit more loud. And it kind of makes sense. There's something wrong and the body's trying to adapt and figure out stuff. And some of the adaptation tools aren't really that effective over time. They're good short term. So that's why my belief is let's start then. The next stage, stage three, is where the mass of people are. Finally, we're diagnosing. And yet I see a lot of people, I hear about a lot of people who get blown off. Ah, don't worry about it. You're not so bad. In
Uh-huh.
stage. We'll treat your blood pressure. Oh, you need a diabetes medicine. Oh, you need, cholesterol medicine. Don't worry about it. Not a lot of guidance. Stage four, people are starting to get sicker, and the flags go up. Let's help these people. Stage five is prepare for replacement therapy, whether that means dialysis or transplant. Those aren't pleasant lives. And they're struggling, they're suffering. And so, where I jumped in was right at the border between three and four. And I mean, I can tell you, all the horror stories. I couldn't sleep well. I had muscle wasting, a little bone wasting. My eyes started declining. I just had cataract surgery, no glasses for the first time in my life. Quite liberating. Um, I mean, it's just quite interesting. Nervous system changes. Of course, everybody's genetically unique. Everybody with kidney decline presents just a little interesting, personalized collage. So, as a clinician, you got to know a whole lot of things, so they're not all going to happen. As a patient, the same thing. I don't have everything that you can get, but I got these. Can I get some attention for it? And
Mhm.
that's where, my passion later in practice life, I couldn't resist. I mean, I have to talk about this because we're so neglecting the early part of kidney decline. We cannot afford to dialyze everybody. It's expensive, you don't feel good, you transplant, you're on drugs. And so what are we waiting for? And that was my, Jersey girl, like, what are you waiting for? I couldn't get it. Like, what are we waiting
Well,
for?
yeah, the watchful waiting in conventional medicine is obviously very frustrating when there is something that can be done. So let's jump into kind of like diagnosis and some of these definitions. So you talked about GFR, which is like glomerular filtration rate. That's my Jersey coming out. And so in terms of like and what about creatinine? Like how do you diagnose some of these stages so that people listening right now might be able to identify and go look and see what their creatinine is and their GFR and see if they have an issue?
Yeah, I mean, every panel, you go anywhere you go medically, you're gonna get, the chemistry panel. Almost always there's a GFR. It'll be noted as EGFR because it's an estimated formula that was made up. Um, Creatinine is what's called a uremic toxin. It's something in the body that when kidney declines, you can't excrete it. That means it builds up in the blood. All right, those two right there can help. there's another lab that's really useful called cystatin C, Cystatn. And it's a little bit more accurate because creatinine can reflect muscle. So some skinny old lady whose creatinine isn't high might have kidney dysfunction, but it's not reflected because there's other factors. Some big bulky person could end up being told they're ill when they're actually not. So cystatin C helps. I'm actually working on a presentation that's looking at earlier urinary markers. I'm not quite ready to talk about it yet, but there are some things I've learned from a Chinese nephrologist that they use, and they're available, in our lab formularies. And will give us information about the tubules. So here's a little anatomy lesson. All the blood, all of it, goes through into the kidney. The kidney is basically this beautiful little bean-shaped organ that has a bunch of things called nephrons. It's like a bunch of beads. Each one is this exquisite little machine. Blood goes through it, it filters, and then there's a series of tubules, and their discernment. They really discern, what do I keep and what do I excrete? And there's a wisdom in that in terms of a spiritual practice to match this, which is something I'm studying recently. And so the tubules are really at the biggest risk because of toxins in our world, toxins in our diet, toxins in the air and the soil, all of that. The tubules are damaged by poisons. And so what does that mean? The discernment, do I keep this sodium? Do I throw it out? Do I keep this phosphorus? And they're complicated. I mean, I'm still really learning the magic of the kidney tubules. And what I learned, they go first, and we don't have any way to monitor that. So there's a certain, use your head. If somebody with high blood pressure, somebody with diabetes, with autoimmune disease, with any kind of cancer issues, kidney's going to be affected. Just like we think, oh, the liver's affected by these things, the kidney is as well. And so you can be a little intuitive about it. Educated intuition says you have a family history, there's diabetes, hypertension, asthma. Okay, your numbers don't look that bad, but let's start the talk about the low-hanging fruit. Not what drug am I going to give you, but what can we do? What can you do? What can I do to optimize kidney as opposed to mindlessly, I didn't know any better, keep slamming the kidneys with stuff that, okay, if I can do better, I will. There's the biggest part of this is willingness. And how do we know? I mean, your question is absolutely the perfect one. Like, how do I even know early on? And a lot of people don't find out until stage 4, and they're sick. Their legs are swelling, they're already got congestive failure and, blah, 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 all kinds of terrible things. And so, ultimately, it's really awareness. And I don't see it. I'll have beautiful functional medicine conversations mentioning every part of the body but kidney. Like, what about kidney? And so we all need to really just like in that inner look. I teach people to do, like the amazing journey. Go within and envision what's my heart look like? What do my lungs look like? Where's the kidneys? And there's 2 of them, and they communicate with each other in interesting ways. And so, once the awareness is there, then perhaps the willingness. I personally did a class trip to the local dialysis center when I was first sick. And I walked in and I said, "Hi, I'm just here to tell you I'll never see you again." And these 2 rather beautiful young Hawaiian women looked at me like I was nuts. But when we told them why I was saying that, they were like, "Oh, good, we never want to see you again." But it's like, this is a reality. And it comes up quick sometimes. I mean, some people just decline quickly. Some people decline slow. And so that's why I think earlier on, when you don't feel as bad, it's easier to go, all right, I'm happy to give up my cup of coffee. I'm happy to give up, how much chocolate I'm eating. I'm happy to give up the whole grains that I thought were so healthy. But oh no, my phosphorus is high. I'll change my habits.
So, are there any numbers that you like on the creatinine? I know that you said cystatin C is better, but for people who get that complete metabolic panel and they're looking at it and they see the creatinine, at what point do you start? Anything above zero point 0.9 is time for concern, or what do you like?
Yeah, yeah, I like to keep it under one.
Yeah.
And at least start the conversation because who knew a plant-based protein diet is safer for kidney? Not everybody agrees, but most people do. And so you start seeing the creatinine creeping up. One of the things you can do is to say, you know what? Modulate how much you're eating, modulate how much meat and dairy, and fish. Animal food ha has issues with kidney. It doesn't mean never, but there's a certain willingness and adaptation. Okay, I can have meat-free days, or I don't always, 3 meals a day. I don't have to have, you know, the bacon and sausage for breakfast and the roast beef sandwich for lunch and the steak for dinner. I mean, it's too much. And so, that was one of the first things that I was taught is explore how much protein, because we're in a fad of lots of protein.
Hmm.
And with kidney, it's probably not the best idea. And I've seen so many people, including myself, monitoring and get better, improve. And that the funny thing is, like carrots and broccoli and rice all have protein. So people are eating way more protein than they realize. And I like folks to use Chronometer. That's an app that if you're patient, it's an annoyance to do it. I guarantee you get a scale and you start monitoring what you're putting in your mouth. That the wisdom that is available by that is amazing. It's like, who knew? I mean, do you know how many grams of protein a day you're eating? No,
I try for 100. I mean, I've been measuring, and more so now that my wife is kind of moving into menopause and she's doing more research on it, and it seems like higher protein is better. But it sounds like, there's if you, depending on what your kidney function is, you might be in trouble.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and again, I'll say this every time, every single CKD person is unique. That's to say, my next door neighbor, well, I smoke 2 packs a day for the last 60 years and I'm fine. Okay, that's nice. But, in general, if you know that you have a diminished function, it's worth entertaining that. I mean, when I started this, I think I was eating 36 grams of protein a day,
Mm.
and got better. I've increased that, and so it's not static, and that's the thing that I like people to realize. It's like this is a fluid thing, and I mean, your function can decrease if you get sick. You get the flu, it might go down. It can come back up because nephrons can get scarred. I've been told by some more enlightened thinkers that even if they get scarred, they can reverse. But generally, when things fibrose, they're not working too good. And so the whole idea is to catch these things before they're stuck in fibrosis to where maybe they're just a little flimsy, and we can do the anti-inflammation, the mitochondrial support, the endothelial support. I mean, all the things we know to do to manifest health, hormonal support. I mean, all of it. It's amazing. I see people improve, from even the teens up into the 50s without that much effort. Some, it's never none. I think the people who were drinking the Pepsis and eating the sugar and, a lot of those people that I knew early on are now dead,
Hmm.
which is, challenging for me because it's like, come on, you can do this. You don't need the Pepsi.
Well, and even just drinking more water, right? That can have a significant improvement in kidney function, right?
Having lost sense of thirst is
Mm,
challenging with kidney. I mean, I can tell you, and it's like, oh yes, drink.
clam.
And so, it's really a thing of willingness. I've been playing around with the idea of the altar and sacrifice and health as a holiness. And so it's really this mind, body, spirit dance and living with some joy rather than total panic, fear, grief. Because, when you find out, and when you find out something's wrong, it's like, oh no, now what? What do I do? And I was early on also told by my integrative oncologist to never use the term failure
Uh-huh.
until you actually are. And so that's why I like to use the word decline rather than, kidney failure. I don't
Yeah, it
want to
sounds
fail.
awful.
It's
Yeah.
terrible, doesn't it? And so it really is a mind state. And I like to play with the concept of discernment.
Hmm.
I mean, and in terms of chronic fatigue, I mean, kidney is a chronic fatigue state, and the mind states, taking time to go vagal. I say go to Vegas, which is the balance in the nervous system. Our lives are just sympathetic overload, blah, 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 constant. And with kidney stuff, and then there's the COMT defect, there's some added on reasons to really learn those techniques, the breath techniques, the cold showers, whatever it takes to counteract because the body's reacting. Something's wrong. Hey, something's wrong. Do something. And so it's like, yes, yes, I know there's something wrong. Okay, well, calm down. Me and my cells have an agreement.
Nice. Well, and I think that there's that crossover between chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, and kidney disease, is that all of them can be damaged by toxins and infections. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that so we've kind of talked about, creatinine. We can look at that. They can look at the glomerular filtration rate. They can have an idea, okay, we need to pay more attention to the kidneys. And then moving into treatment, it sounds like drinking more water, eating better, making better decisions, getting more into your parasympathetic, your vagus nerve. What other things do you like to do before we move into peptides as a therapy?
So I've been evolving this idea of harvesting the low-hanging fruit from the kidney tree of lifestyle. I just made that up Saturday. But it's a long conversation that I've been having in my head about this, that the it's a tree of life to survive. And so what is the low-hanging fruit? Diet really needs to be organic. Glyphosate, I have a chapter in my book which we'll talk about on how glyphosate can harm kidney. Sleep gets messed up by kidney decline. So there's something that has to get looked at. Hydration, as I said, thirst can get damaged in this process, and so it has to be, you got to try harder. I mean, so can appetite for some people, and so it compromises that. Exercise is not optional. Something. It can be laying on your bed doing leg lifts. I mean, it's something. And it can be fun, like dance. It could be work, like gardening, all of it. Resistance exercise, aerobic exercise, movement, having fun. In other words, joy in life, putting down the load and, letting all that off. It isn't trivial. I mean, there's science to it. And toxins, I could write an encyclopedia about it, and it's really minimized. I think that it's not unwise to get a toxin panel, heavy metal panel.
Hmm.
You know, I've had a glyphosate level. I changed some things that I do, and it got better. Um, I personally did a couple of heavy metal panels and have been dealing with both mercury and lead, which are known hazards to kidney, and
Hmm.
they're known hazards to the environment. And so, you know, I think that there's wisdom in being aware of that. Um, Relationships can be toxic. Awareness again, you know, that's important. Work toxins is something I've seen a lot with the people I've done consults with, that like, oh my God, you know, you're a glass blower and your kidney function just dropped 40 points. What do you want to do? You know,
Hmm.
and these are hard choices, some of them, but really important. I mean, you mentioned infections, being aware of all of this, you know, the stealth infections, mold, you know, long haul COVID, we know is harmful to kidney, you know, all of it, you know, EBV. I mean, all this stuff that is kind of on the periphery of conventional medicine, I found really intensely useful to try to regenerate kidney, you know, to get rid of some of the, you know, there's layers and layers. And so each time you peel a little bit away, the gestalt of it relaxes, eases up a little bit.
Nice. So let's go into peptides. So for people who aren't familiar, can you tell us a little bit about peptides and the bioregulators and
Absolutely.
yeah. I know you've got this book. Can you want to hold up that book?
I
Because
do.
I mean, like, we're obviously not going to be able to get to, oh my gosh, this Bible, this huge this Bible.
And
But
this
yeah,
artwork is so beautiful.
it's really beautiful. Yeah. But
It's
yeah, give
fa-
us the
a
clip.
Ukrainian artist did that for me, which is
Oh,
I love.
nice.
Um, so I didn't mention nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is just slash and burn by kidney. Nitric oxide, like oxygen, you need to thrive, to survive. And it basically helps blood vessels, among many other things. But, you know, in the context of kidney, the kidney's a glob of blood vessels. And the whole thing, you know, okay, we got circulation to, okay. So I had low nitric oxide and was struggling taking some. I kept, you know, using these saliva sticks, whether they're accurate or not. Mine was terribly low. And I heard our friend Beth Shirley, who's a PharmD and nutrition PhD, brilliant woman who teaches us all about nitric oxide, mention BPC 157, which is a peptide that comes from the stomach. The body recognizes it itself. And essentially, that was my portal into learning about peptides, because when she said it optimizes, it assists in optimizing nitric oxide, that got my attention, and I started researching, tried it out. It actually was life changing for me with the first dose, which I'll spare the story at the moment, but it was really impressive. And I studied with several people who were offering courses. There's many, many, many. I mean, there's thymus peptides, which are amazing for the immune system. You know, there's mitochondrial peptides, there's anti-infective peptides, there's ones that stimulate growth hormone. Most of those are considered the larger ones, up to 50 amino acids. Some proteins have like hundreds, so it's just a fragment. And because they're small, they have agility in the body. They can hop around in ways that bigger proteins can't. Plus, if you take them by mouth, they get broken down, so they have to be injected. Then I learned about these bioregulators, which are totally amazing. They're very tiny, basically 2 to 4 amino acids, little things, which means they don't need a receptor to get in the cell. They have transporters. So they get in the cell, they get in the nucleus. They don't need a receptor. And then here's the really cool part about it. They lodge in the DNA, stretch open the DNA, and repair epigenetic damage.
Whoa.
Exactly. That was what I said. I was like, I want that. Because it, for one thing, it's used a lot in the longevity community. Chronic kidney disease is a progeric illness. That means accelerated aging. And I am so aware of that. I mean, I was so aware watching myself, you're going along. Okay, we all know we're getting older. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, is that? And so, I became aware of the whole anti-aging mindset, but not for longevity specifically, but for pathology, for amending the damages of illness. And so these bioregulators getting in there, essentially reclaiming factory settings, is truly amazing. It won't change the genetics you come with, but life on Earth harms the genes that we come with, and that can be repaired. And so I started looking at this. The first one I found out about was a kidney bioregulator. They were discovered in Russia by a PhD gerontologist who was in the military and was ordered by the Soviet military to discover remedies to protect their military from American military chemical and radioactive weaponry. And he did it. And then he was given an institute and blobs of money to do research. So there's decades of quite amazing research, of which a lot of it is in this weightlifter book here that, when you're not reading this, I say, it's definitely good for weightlifting. And so in time, when the Soviet went away, their institute is still hot and heavy. They've seen like 2 million patients. They see a lot of pathology. And so I started looking at the array of these. And the way they're set up is there's a lot of different categories. There's brain bioregulators. There's eye bioregulators, pineal, thyroid, thymus, lung, heart, blood vessel, adrenal, pancreas, kidney, stomach, cartilage, parathyroid, muscle, testis, prostate, ovary. I think I've covered it all. And what I found was every one of those categories has something to do with chronic kidney disease. Maybe not all of them in everybody, but the tendency for a lot of these things is there. So there's decline, it's vague. Doc, I don't feel good. I'm tired. Oh, I can't quite get in gear to organize myself. These are things that can be addressed with these. And so I got excited about it and just hopped in and started doing this research and put together basically this tome, which I'm being told is a masterpiece. So there we have it. And I've had some complaints about the price because, it's 800 pages, but I was also advised to charge $450 for it. And I was like, there's no way in the world. I'd rather give it away than do that. So it's been exciting to see people learning from this, reaching out to me, different cases are coming, some of them fairly complicated, and yet I've learned to put them together in protocols that are personalized. So like a diabetic would have different needs than somebody, say, who has lupus. Similar, but different. The people who have real complicated cardiovascular issues, that there's vicious cycles, which came first? The heart disease, the kidney disease, the brain inflammation, the kidney, all these axes. And so, the book is set up with, the kidney brain axis. And here's what this is about. And here are the different categories of bioregulator peptides and how you can use them. And, I'm hoping that more and more clinicians will hop on this bandwagon. They're not that expensive. You don't have to take them constantly. They are oral. There are some injectable. So here's another piece of it. There are various categories of the bioregulators. Some of them are basically like refined glandulars. They come from animals and they've evolved, technologies that I have to admit are above my head, in terms of pharmacologic chemistry. But they've fine-tuned them. They're very cautious about infections, and the prions that can tend to happen in animals. They're cautious, which is why you need to be careful and not just buy any product, because not everyone does this kind of purification. Um, and some of them are synthetic. So they take the 2 to 4 amino acids identical to what the body has, and those can be injected. And there's an interesting role for the injectables in that way. But I like the orals. I think they're effective. I've heard other doctors say, no, no, you have to do the injectables. I see too many improvements to say, oh yeah, you have to inject it. You don't.
And how long do you have to take it for?
Every case is different, the severity of which, like, the dosing and the duration. Um, but basically, I'll start somebody, say, with a month of pilotax, the kidney one, and find 2 or 3 others to support that. It might be thymus and pineal, liver, and then cycle. It might be once a month for 10 days, or maybe every 3 months. And again, it just depends on the severity. Like somebody in stage 4, I would use a higher dose and a more prolonged course than someone in stage 2 who is doing really well, but wanting some protective and preventive assistance. And I can't resist.
Lovely product placement. I love it. And
This was
so,
a this was a gift from our formatter.
nice. And so for you're saying for people who are more sick, then they'd have to take it for longer periods of time. And so because it seems like you pulse it, or it seems like you're
Yes.
not supposed to take it continuously. Why is that? Can you overdose?
Well, you can't. Sorry, my dog is being a pest. Go. Um, it's going to knock over the screen. Um, it's more like people get sensitized and they just don't become as effective. I was just reading about that in regard to carnosine, which is, all right, I'm going to go. Learning to be assertive with our rescue dog. Um, it's interesting, though, because I contacted a Greek physician who's written books about bioregulators, Marios Kyriazis, and asked him, so what about taking pilotax long term? Because I wanted to take it long term. And he said, there's no problem. Unless you get side effects, which is funny to me because you don't get side effects. I mean, people really don't. There's very few things that it's like, oh, you need to know, don't do this and this. Children, not so much. These tend to work even better with older people because there's more accumulated damage, so they're a little bit more effective. And it's said, don't do it in pregnant or lactating women. I agree with that mostly because I don't think we know. And
Right.
that would be something for me to. I'm a pen pal, email pen pal with the wife of the man who developed these. She's a pediatrician who's been very generous in mentoring me. And I want to verify that with her because I actually don't know. But there are some cases like using the brain bioregulators, either IV or intramuscularly for periods of time with children with brain damage or birth defects that are brain damaged to protect them from further epigenetic hits
Hmm.
with nice results. And so, it's really, there's a lot of creativity woven into using these because they're so safe. You can kind of go for it. And I saw something recently that another one of the peptide pharmacists was talking about very high dosing for pathology. Um, and I want to get in touch with him because it was like higher than I'd seen.
Hmm.
And yet, you know, the community using this is sharing what it's doing. And I think in time it'll evolve to where we're all a little smarter with how to utilize these.
I'm sure. Yeah, and what are you seeing in terms of how long it takes for people to see improvement?
Well, here's my favorite story. So I live in a pretty rural place, and some friends slash neighbors raise chickens. I mean, and you know, they grow worms to feed them. I mean, they're amazing. He had a minor stroke. He was still functional, but not really doing well. And he'd seen me, you know, working on the book, and you know, I was sickly looking, and you know, people would go, "Wow, look at you! You look so much better." And he wanted bioregulators, and so I gave him brain and blood vessel. That was all. And I think I gave it to him for a month. And in a month's time, he said, I feel like I have a new lease on life. I can think clearly. I'm physically more able because he's like driving heavy equipment and, you know, doing farm stuff. And so that was my favorite because I mean, it was just night and day. I mean, he said it's like the lights came back on for him. I love that. And so he and his wife are both doing a whole year of cycling all of the bioregulators. I came up with, you know, specific strategies to match each of their needs because they were both impressed. She's not seeing as much, you know, she's like, well, I feel good. I don't see that much. They're in their 60s. And and yet, you know, she has Hashimoto's and has been doing well, you know, and so heavier for her with thymus for the anti-inflammation and the autoimmunity and the thyroid bioregulator, but you know, still heart, lungs, kidney. I mean, you know, all you know, the kidney bone is connected to the eye bone. You know, it's like everything talks to itself.
Nice. And what do you think about, the only company that I'm familiar with is Integrative Peptides. Do you have a favorite company who's offering this right now?
Yeah, Profound Health in comes out of England. They're really good to work with. For clinicians, there's clinician um, accounts that are very reasonable, and it's kind of the professional arm of Profound Health, IAS, International Anti-Aging Systems. Um, Through my website, people can contact me. I'm happy to connect anybody. There's another company that is connected with the Russians, so I trust the purity, and that's an issue to me because heavy metals and prion risk isn't worth it.
Right.
Called Vitual, Vitual, and they're making interesting combination products. So there'll be one like for women, and it has three. All of them have three, so it's nice because instead of taking, you know, six capsules, you take two, which is appealing, but they need to be the three that you want. And I just recommended it to somebody who has high blood pressure and some issues to do the cardio bundle that they make, which was liver with heart and blood vessel. I was like, yeah, that sounds like a good combination. So, you know, there are some other companies that are doing it. I am not absolutely convinced that they're this. I don't know their purity, so I can't say one way or another. There's a couple of companies like RU Pharma has some products that the others don't have. Um, and one thing to know about integrative peptides, I mean, they're doing some combo products, but from what I understand, some of them are extracts, which are different than bioregulators. I mean, the thing is, not all small peptides are bioregulators. In other words, they don't do that DNA repair. They do
Mm.
something, but you know, knowing the mechanism of each substance is really useful because then you can have more precision as a clinician, I mean, also as a patient, to deal with what's going on. Not like, well, my gallbladder's having a problem. Here's gallbladder. That's okay. I mean, it might actually work well, but more likely, if you know some of the cytokines that you're headed for, I mean, I've used integrative peptides product, um, Thymogen alpha 1, which is a combination of two bioregulators, Thymogen and Vilon. Vilon is one of my favorites. I love Vilon. It's potent. Um, for long haul COVID people, and seen it to be very useful along with some other things. I find it to be very useful. One of my utter favorites isn't really one of the Russian bioregulators, carnosine, not carnitine, but carnosine is a 2 amino acid bioregulator that has such an incredible array of actions that I pretty much am using it for everybody. And interestingly, I just was reading this morning that it might not be a bad idea to cycle it. And that could mean as easy as 5 days on, 2 days off, so that the body doesn't quit reacting to it. It's like, it's you.
Hmm.
And, there's biochemistry to that, but I like the cartoon of it. It's like it just becomes sort of oblivious. I don't want to bother with you. And that's when people come and they say, oh, it's not working. And, with some of these, nutrients matter. And so, one of the things that I love is to do like nutrient panels with kidney stuff. It's crazy how many things are just off. And so there's something to do early on, like the Genova testing is lovely for that. You get these reports that take months to really get through all the actionables. Again, you don't want to do 12 things at once. And more advanced people, like, on the bottom end of stage 3 and into stage 4, people are more fragile. You have to be careful what you're dumping on, the amount and the frequency. People just need a little gentler touch.
Awesome. Yeah, I could definitely see that. So, Robin, this has been really wonderful. Where can people go to learn more about you and the book?
So I'll show off this beautiful cover, which I love. Um, I have a website called Renology is Kidney Success.com, because that's that's the whole idea. Renology is the art and clinical science of kidney success. The website kind of sticks the book in your face, but there's a little place that says menu. I've been trying to get my formatter person to make this a little bit more obvious. And I have some blogs I'm working on, some videos. There's a way to contact me on there. And I think we all can just join together and let's take this kidney demic and turn it into a kidney success jamboree.
I love it. Robin, thanks so much for joining me here today. Really appreciate you taking the time.
No, thank you. It's great to talk to you. Aloha.
So, if you have chronic fatigue, whether it's from long COVID or chronic fatigue syndrome, go ahead and click the link below to watch my latest masterclass, where I go deep into our 4-step process that has helped thousands of others resolve their symptoms naturally. After you watch that video, if you're interested in seeing if we're a good fit to work together, you can then get on a free call with me. All right, thanks so much. I'll see you over there. I hope you learned something on today's podcast. If you did, please share it with your friends and family and leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It's really helpful for getting this information out to more people who desperately need it. Sharing all the experts I know and love and the powerful tips I have is one of my absolute favorite things to do. Thanks for being part of my community. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. It is provided with the understanding that it does not constitute medical or other professional advice or services. Thanks for listening, and have an amazing day.